If Adam and Eve were the first humans, then who did Cain marry? The Bible tells us Cain had a wife, but never says where she came from. For thousands of years, that single mystery has haunted believers and fueled skeptics alike. Critics call it the Bible's greatest contradiction. Churches avoid it. Scholars sidestep it. But what if the answer was never missing, just buried, hidden in plain sight all along? What if the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve weren't forgotten at all? What if their names were deliberately erased from Genesis, but preserved in an ancient text the church doesn't want you to read? This is Bible Origin, the place where we uncover the mysteries they refuse to teach. If you're ready to discover what's been buried for millennia, make sure to subscribe and leave a like right now, because the answer to this question doesn't just solve a biblical mystery, it reveals the hidden origins of humanity itself. And once you see it, you'll never read Genesis the same way again. In the beginning, before kingdoms rose and languages divided, before prophets walked the earth and laws were given, there was a garden, and within it a divine breath that awakened the very first heartbeat of mankind. According to Genesis, God formed Adam from the dust of the ground, shaping him with divine hands. But Adam did not truly live until God himself breathed life into his nostrils, a breath that carried more than air. It carried spirit, purpose, and identity. Can you imagine being the very first to love, to speak, to feel the warmth of the sun and the coolness of Eden's rivers? Not long after, God saw that it was not good for man to be alone. While Adam slept, God took from his side and formed a companion, not from dust this time, but from Adam's very bone and flesh. From this divine act came Eve, the first woman. Their relationship was not only the first marriage, but also the first covenant between humanity and God. As time passed, Adam and Eve bore children. Among their offspring were two sons whose names echo through the ages, Cain and Abel. Cain became a man of the earth, tilling the soil and drawing life from the ground. Abel chose the path of a shepherd, watching over flocks under the open skies. As they matured, both brothers brought offerings to God. Cain brought fruits from the soil, the result of his work in the fields. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock, including the richest and most valuable parts. The Bible tells us that the Lord looked with favor upon Abel and his offering, but Cain's gift did not receive the same acknowledgement. Why would God accept one offering and reject the other? Many believe the key lies not in what was given, but in how it was given. Abel's offering was the very best, chosen with care, presented with reverence, and filled with genuine love. Cain's, while still a contribution, lacked the same distinction. Worship is not about mere ritual, but about the heart behind the sacrifice. Cain's heart, once filled with pride, began to twist with disappointment. The sting of rejection grew into jealousy, and his face fell under the weight of shame. God saw this inner storm rising and reached out with a warning. Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. But would Cain listen? Instead of seeking understanding, Cain let the darkness grow. He invited Abel to go out into the field, perhaps under the pretense of brotherly talk. But far from any witness, something irreversible happened. Cain, burning with envy and blind with rage, struck his brother down. The soil that once yielded fruit from his hands now drank the blood of his kin. This was not merely sibling rivalry, it was the first murder in human history, the first death, the first irreversible breaking of life, and with it a shadow fell across the story of mankind. God, whose eyes see all, came to Cain and asked a question that echoed like thunder. Where is your brother Abel? It wasn't that God did not know,
It was a test, a divine invitation for Cain to confess. But instead of truth, Cain gave a reply soaked in defiance. "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Can you feel the coldness in those words? This response revealed a hardened heart, a spirit unwilling to carry the weight of responsibility. But God does not forget the innocent. The Lord replied, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." God then pronounced the consequence. The ground which had once yielded its harvest would now become hostile. No matter how hard Cain worked, the soil would resist him. He would become a restless wanderer, roaming the earth without stability, without home. This judgment cut deep into Cain's heart. For the first time, we see him unravel. He cried out, "My punishment is more than I can bear." He feared that as a marked man, others would rise up and strike him down in vengeance. But God, in an act of divine restraint and mercy, put a mark on Cain, a mysterious sign that served as divine protection. Despite his sin, God would not allow his life to be taken. Why would God protect a murderer? This paradoxical moment where punishment meets mercy raises questions that echo to this day. With the mark upon him, Cain left the presence of the Lord. He journeyed east of Eden into a land called Nod, a place whose very name means wandering. Cain was alone, exiled, the first fugitive in human history, walking into an empty wilderness with no family, no community, no future. Adam and Eve were back near Eden. Abel was dead. And yet, Genesis 4:17 says, "Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch." Wait, his wife? The Bible doesn't say Cain found a wife. It doesn't say he met a woman. It speaks as if she was just there, as if her existence needed no explanation. And this is where the story takes a turn. At this point in history, only Adam, Eve, and Cain existed. Abel was dead. Seth hadn't been born yet. The math doesn't add up. So where did she come from, and why doesn't the Bible tell us? If Adam and Eve were the first humans, then who was Cain's wife? If Adam and Eve were the first human beings and Cain had been cast out, then who was this woman? The text offers no name, no background, no genealogy. It is as if she appeared out of nowhere. This seemingly small detail opens the door to one of the most debated mysteries in biblical history. Even before this moment, a clue had been dropped. In Genesis 4:14, Cain cries out, "Everyone that findeth me shall slay me." His fear strongly implies that others existed who might take vengeance on him. But if Adam and Eve were the only humans alive, who were these others that Cain feared? God's response to Cain only deepens the mystery. Rather than dismissing Cain's fear, God takes it seriously and places a mark of protection on him. But again, this implies the presence of people outside the immediate family. Why would God place such a mark unless there were real threats? Some suggest that Adam and Eve had many children whose names were never recorded. Could Cain's wife have been one of his sisters? Genesis 5:4 tells us, "And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters." Though their names are lost to history, their presence is affirmed in Scripture. Others have proposed that there may have been other humans created by God outside of Adam and Eve's lineage. This interpretation, while controversial, attempts to reconcile the Bible with archaeological evidence of early human settlement. Were these early people part of forgotten branches of humanity? Even so, we must tread carefully. The Bible does not confirm the existence of any humans outside of Adam and Eve's family. It focuses intensely on the spiritual lineage that would eventually lead to Noah, Abraham, and ultimately the Messiah. And yet, can the silence of Scripture be just as telling as its words? What does it mean that the daughters of Adam and Eve were never named, though essential to the continuation of life? Stay with this story. The next piece of this puzzle may change the way you see humanity's forgotten beginnings. But what if Cain's wife wasn't just a sister? What if her identity was meant to reveal something far greater about humanity itself? What if the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve weren't forgotten at all? Let's find out.
The theory most widely accepted among scholars and believers offers both a practical and scripturally grounded explanation. According to this view, Cain likely married one of his own sisters or a close relative born from the same original family line. Genesis does not tell us that Adam and Eve had only Cain and Abel. The narrative leaves room for far more. Genesis 5:4 plainly says that Adam lived 800 years and begat sons and daughters. This verse opens the door to the possibility that Adam and Eve had a large and fruitful family, one that included many children who went unnamed, but whose lives were essential to populating the early earth. If the entire human race originated from a single couple, then whom else could Cain have married except a sibling or close relative in that ancient world? What we now see as controversial was then a matter of divine purpose. How else could the earth be filled as God commanded in Genesis 1:28? The practice of marrying close kin was not just acceptable in those early days, it was necessary. There were no established nations, no tribes, no communities beyond the first family. Throughout early biblical history, we find examples of this pattern being repeated. Noah's family provides a striking case. After the flood, Noah, his wife, and their 3 sons were the only human survivors. These sons had wives, and humanity had to rebuild from a small family nucleus. Even Abraham, the father of nations, was married to Sarah, who was his half-sister. Genesis 20:12 records Abraham himself saying, "She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife." This union was not shamed, it was blessed, and through it came Isaac, the child of promise. Isaac married Rebekah, the daughter of his cousin. Jacob married 2 cousins, Leah and Rachel, the daughters of Laban. These were not exceptions, but examples of cultural continuity. But why did these practices later change? The answer lies in the evolution of God's laws. The Mosaic Law, given to Israel through Moses more than 2 millennia after Adam and Eve, introduced a new ethical structure. In Leviticus 18, laws were established that prohibited marriage between close kin. Could it be that God allowed what was necessary in the beginning, only to restrict it later as humanity grew stronger and more numerous? What does this say about divine timing, about how God meets us not only where we are, but when we are? In the context of a brand new world where the earth was still young and human DNA had not yet been corrupted by generations of degeneration, such unions would not carry the same biological consequences they do today. It was not a scandal, it was survival necessity. The biblical account often casts a long shadow over lesser-known figures. Genesis 5:4 tells us that Adam had other sons and daughters, yet no names are given. The spotlight remains firmly on Cain, Abel, and later Seth. Why were the daughters of Adam and Eve not named? The truth is, the Bible was never intended to function as a full genealogy. The story it tells is one of covenant, not necessarily chronology. Yet those gaps have inspired curiosity for centuries. One ancient text sought to fill the silence. The Book of Jubilees, an apocryphal work sometimes called Little Genesis, provides rich expansions of the stories found in Genesis. While not included in the official canon, this book has historical value and is still regarded with respect in some traditions. According to the Book of Jubilees, 2 daughters of Adam and Eve were named Awan and Azura. Awan, in particular, is believed to have been Cain's wife. Her name has been translated to mean either vice or power. Could her name reflect the burden she carried as the partner of the world's first murderer, or perhaps the strength she embodied? When Genesis 4:17 states that Cain made love to his wife and she became pregnant, the canonical Bible leaves her anonymous, but the Book of Jubilees offers a name and a deeper connection to the early human lineage. Could Awan have been Cain's sister,
born in the years following the expulsion from Eden. Some traditions suggest that Cain did not meet his wife immediately after his exile, but only after many decades had passed. Perhaps nearly 300 years went by before he built the city of Enoch. If so, then the population of the earth would have grown substantially, perhaps reaching dozens, even hundreds of people, all descended from Adam and Eve. And what of Azura? According to Jubilees, she became the wife of Seth. Her name is associated with the sky, pure blue, or with lapis lazuli, the deep blue stone that often symbolizes holiness and divine clarity. Azura's union with Seth is more than a marriage, it is a turning point. After Abel's murder and Cain's exile, the lineage of righteousness was broken, but God appointed Seth to restore the path. Eve herself expressed this hope in Genesis 25:25. God has appointed me another offspring in place of Abel, because Cain killed him. In some traditions, Azura had first been Abel's wife, making her story even more profound. After Abel's murder, she became a widow, and in time became the wife of Seth. Her life, marked by sorrow and restoration, echoes the redemptive arc of Scripture itself. From their union came a lineage that would carry the spiritual thread of humanity forward. One of their children was Enosh, whose name means frail man. It was during his lifetime that men began to call on the name of the Lord. This marked the beginning of formal worship. Another descendant of Seth's line is Enoch, the man whose relationship with God was so intimate that he bypassed death altogether. Genesis 5:24 records, Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him away. But the most extraordinary figure in Seth's lineage is Noah, the grandson of Methuselah. Noah was chosen by God to preserve not only humanity, but every species of creature. From Seth and Azura's line came worship, communion, endurance, and salvation. The daughters of Adam and Eve, so often forgotten, played roles of incalculable importance. Awan became a bridge between exile and continuation. Azura stood as the matriarch of the righteous bloodline that would one day give rise to Christ himself. As we come to a close, the pieces of this ancient puzzle begin to form a clearer picture. By the time Cain sought to marry, there were already several sisters and nieces available, women born from the many unnamed sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. Given the longevity and fertility of humanity's first generations, the earth was not as sparsely populated as we might assume. Over hundreds of years, families multiplied, and intermarriage among close kin was both common and necessary. The Bible is clear on one essential point. All of humanity descends from a single original pair, Adam and Eve. Acts 17:26 proclaims, "From one man he made all the nations." This is not only a theological statement, it is a declaration of unity, reminding us that every nation, every race, every person has a common origin. It's important to remember that the Book of Jubilees is considered apocryphal. The information it contains, though intriguing, should be read with discernment. The Holy Bible was never meant to document every individual who lived. Rather, it offers what is essential, the divine message of hope, salvation, and how we are called to live. As we read in Isaiah 55:8-9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways." While we may never have a definitive answer about every detail, we are given enough to seek God, and that is the heart of it all. Faith is not built on knowing every name or decoding every mystery. Faith is built on trust, on walking with God even when the road isn't fully mapped out. But here's what we can know with certainty. Cain's wife is more than a historical question. She's a mirror of humanity's origin, of grace after sin, of life continuing even when judgment has fallen. The same God who marked Cain for protection still marks his people for redemption. The forgotten daughters were never forgotten by God. Their names may be lost to us, but their legacy flows through every generation. and that legacy leads to hope, to restoration, to Christ. So who was Cain's wife? Maybe the better question is, who are we that God would carry our story through theirs? Now it's your turn to reflect. Do you believe the information presented by the Book of Jubilees? Who do you think Cain's wife really was? What does this mystery reveal to you about God's design? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. If this story challenged the way you see Scripture, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone wrestling with biblical mysteries, and subscribe to Bible Origins for more truths they don't teach in Sunday school. Because the question isn't just who was Cain's wife, the question is, who are you in God's unfolding story? May the wisdom of God, the peace of His Spirit, and the love of His Word be with you always. God bless you.